Okay. All right. Today we're exploring how AI is actually showing up in full service restaurants, not abstract predictions, but in real operational improvements and decision making. I'm joined by two leaders who spent their careers shaping restaurant technology and who also happen to have known each other for many years. First, we have Henry Gimelfarb, Chief Revenue Officer at Loop AI, which is a fully automated delivery intelligence platform that brings accuracy and visibility to delivery revenue and payouts. Something I wish I had when I still owned and operated restaurants. This was an area that I'm sure we've lost money and never got paid for a ton of stuff we did. I also should note that there is a very high probability that Henry and I are related. My original name was Gimelfarb, so you just put Farb at the end. And I noticed Henry's name, and we also think we might be related to Bill Crystal now, I think is the other.
Yeah, that was a good find.
And then we have Bill Lindsey, someone that I've loved knowing over the years. When he was pretty much top dog at Compete, he would take my calls when I had 2 restaurants, when I had 5 restaurants, and I always really appreciated it. I didn't know how we got everything done. I was introduced by Gary Seamus to Bill, one of my partners. Bill, you're founder of Cogswell, one of the founders, restaurant cost management tool. So you're really focused on inventory, recipes, cost controls, and that such. So we'll talk about where AI is generally helpful, where it risks going too far, and how operators can navigate this moment without losing what makes full service dining special. So I wanted to just kind of kick things off. You two have known each other for many years. How did your paths first cross, and what kept the connection going after all these years? I guess I'll aim that towards Bill. I'll let you start there.
Okay, I'll start. Henry and I met at Plate IQ. I'm pretty sure that's the case, Henry. If I'm wrong, correct me. But Henry was working for our old pal Bavuk and was running sales for Plate IQ, and we had just come off the acquisition at Compete. And Bavuk asked me to see if I might be of some help in strategizing and gaining new market share. I think more than anything, Henry, helping out with all the Compete customers that were signing up for the Plate IQ platform. So I think that was maybe, I don't know how many years ago, but we've known each other ever since. I should also mention that I had a similar role with Anon at Loop. Anon asked me to help advise them and get started before Henry joined. I like to say I was a very active strategic advisor until he met Henry, and he's got all the advice he needs, and he's in very, very capable hands.
Yeah, so was that obviously as an existing relationship? Did that come across, let's say, the board when you guys were kind of talking about it to bring Henry on? How did that even happen?
No, actually, Anon let me know that he had hired Henry and knew that Henry and I knew each other.
Got it.
I just told him, I said, if you'd asked me who to hire, I would have started with Henry. So definitely the right choice.
So then, Henry, over the years, you guys' paths have crossed. I mean, how often do you guys even talk? Is it random, things like this, or do you guys catch up more regularly?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, Bill is still one of the most active people in our industry. I think I still see you at virtually every single trade show that I'm at. So we kind of have it's definitely impromptu, but I think it's more organic where, we definitely run in and catch up, probably once, twice every month or so, depending on the trade show schedule. We're on the opposite side of the country from each other, to be fair.
Right. You're down in Florida now. You're not in New York. And then, Bill, you're on the West Coast.
Yes, I am. Reno, Nevada.
Yeah. I always forget that you're in Nevada.
I'm in the mountains.
I assume everyone's in New York until I hear otherwise. So, Bill, I'm gonna start with you, and then I'm gonna kind of jump to Henry. Where do you see AI already making a meaningful difference for full service operators today, both operationally and then in ways that support, possibly the guest experience as well?
I think Henry would agree with this, that maybe number one is invoice automation. That's where Henry and I met. We've had a lot of background with it. Even before AI, it was a very, very efficient method of updating accounts payable, and we use that data at Cogswell for inventory optimization. So I think number one, invoice automation, but certainly I've become much more involved in forecasting, prep, ordering, forecasting, usage projections, certainly labor and scheduling, but even more so, there's a lot of reports out there that people have access to, but I don't think they always understand the meaning behind some of those reports. So menu engineering, price optimization, and then maybe last, marketing and guest data, and finding ways to be a little bit more targeted in terms of how restaurants market to different demographics.
So when you say, let's say for supporting kind of invoice use, what does that actually mean in terms of utilizing AI? Are you submitting it and whatever tool you're using is able to just decipher what is on the invoice and it could just pull it in? Like, what does that really mean? And this is where I think I sometimes have challenges where, like, I hear what you just said, like I hear it, but I don't really understand what that actually means, in terms of
question. That's absolutely the right question. And I may defer to Henry for more details on this, but there's really two components to it. One being OCR, optical character recognition, that's been around for many, many, many years, certainly improved in recent years with technology. But the other side of it is, from our standpoint at Cogswell, we take that information that's scraped off the invoices and we recognize the item, we recognize the pack size. Our software is the only product out there that's designed to fully automate setup of inventory items. So we have this massive database of every vendor pack description we've ever seen on an invoice. So with just the data that we scan off invoices, we can recognize the item, the pack size, and set that item up for inventory counts in a very efficient manner. I like to say the kids call that AI. We've always called that data mapping.
So that's an interesting point, right? These are things that you both have seen over the years that might get pushed into that funnel. Henry, what are some, we just talked about the invoices. What are some of the meaningful changes, I guess, that you've seen with AI, I guess, broadly speaking, for restaurants?
Yes, I think there's definitely a trap here where folks will kind of, like, automation has been around for decades in various forms, right? And I think what we're seeing today is a little bit different than that, right? Like, when people think about AI in our space today, they think about things like chat, voice, ordering through AI, and honestly, some of those things are pretty promising, right? But if you look at what's actually going on in the LLM world, right? Like ChatGPT, it still can't file your taxes, it still can't book tickets for you, right? That's really because there's these micro decisions every step of the way that humans account for that the AI can't just yet, right? It's probably like 95% of the way there, to be fair, but in that space, 95% of the way, honestly, is probably not enough, right? It needs to be perfect and it needs to be in real time, just like a human being. And with what's out today, that's kind of hard to do, right? So what ends up happening is, like, every mistake is not just a person making a mistake now, it's a human delegating to an AI, right? And in our space, that gets a little tricky because it comes off as they don't care about you, right? The customer, which amplifies said mistake, right? It's easy to forgive a person, right? We are only human after all. But it's much harder to forgive tech when a human is using it to replace human interaction, right? It becomes impersonal. And now all of a sudden your inefficiencies, they get treated like insults, right? So regarding our industry, where I think there is great alignment is really what Bill's talking about is the back of the house, right? There's tens of billions of dollars that restaurants are spending annually in closing their books. And that's happening a month after, serving an order, right? And that's a pretty prohibitively high price to pay regarding the time it takes for you to really know if you made money or lost money, right? And AI can facilitate that in real time, right? Because with math, unlike with the LLM stuff, it can be 100%, right? You can know immediately what your margin profile is. What AI really needs there is just verifiability, right? And it needs to know the decision was right. And with numbers, it can, right? Because your receivables are zero or they're not, right? So
if the information that's been, by the way, that was fascinating. That makes total sense. Plus, that 5% has got to be the biggest challenge ever. I mean, that's got to, at least in my head, I don't know. But so in terms of getting to, let's say, 99% or 100% in terms of data, and providing actionable information, how much it still needs to be a human, right? That's created the foundation to an extent, right? I mean, the information still has to start somewhere, or can it just kind of pick up and use enough stuff that just exists out there in the universe that it can combine it all, that generally knows what you're starting with without you even having to, like, create a database, for example?
No, I mean, that's actually the whole point, right? AI is really going to only be, in any capacity, is only going to be as good as the data that it's fed, right? So it has to start with some kind of structure. And what we're seeing today is completely different. And I think, and we will probably end up getting into this conversation probably deeper a little bit later, but AI itself has pivoted, right? It's like, when you were talking earlier, I think before we started this call, like, I started using AI a couple of years ago, like when ChatGPT came out, like 3 years ago, it was basically a language module, right? And what we're seeing today is a whole new world of it. We're talking agentic AI, right? And that's really the game changer. So yeah, absolutely. It starts with kind of the data points, and AI today is able to really tap into any source that you give it to and kind of analyze and break it down and do it in real time. And I think that's the parts that are exciting today. And that's what really actually separates it from automation, right? Automation in reality is more brainless, right? And AI doesn't have a brain either, right? It's more, it's kind of like OCR in the sense that like at Plate IQ, what we were doing is we're really training the OCR to look at where on an invoice to look for a specific item or for a specific detail. And in that regard, it's similar, right? Like you have to go and train the AI to go through the various clicks or look at the various pages and identify. And in that regard, it's very similar. It just takes it several steps further than what an OCR initial system would have done, 10 years ago.
So let's take Loop AI, for example. Again, it just seems to be a service that is just, I don't know who wouldn't want this at this point. Delivery was such a huge part of our business post-COVID, especially. Has AI allowed your company to, I guess, provide a service or a tool that in no way could have been created 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, look, honestly, the essence of what Loop does, has in some ways always been available to the industry, right? Because you could always hire someone to do it, right? Mm-hmm. The whole point is that that's the AI is the replacement there. But in many ways, impossible, because this person to kind of match that would need to be working 24/7, do all this work, build your reports, constantly check back and forth on data, and basically have every skill under the sun available to do this, right?
Which would be much more expensive, and that would get passed on.
And the quality of data and the way that it matters, right? All the ratings and reviews, the error rates, the driver wait times, the missed orders, all of those are essentially shared in real time. So as I was just saying, basically 3 years ago, ChatGPT launched and it was just this chatbot, right? Today, we are in this day of agents. And, when I talk to people about this who aren't kind of privy to what are agents? What does that mean, right? Is it like a Hollywood agent, right? No. An agent's basically like a long running, self-directing loop of a variety of skills and actions that the AI is able to deploy and demonstrate, and this is the most important part, human-like results, right? So for example, let's say for emails, I'm just going to give a super simplified example of what this structure looks like. You tell it to go into your inbox. You tell it to organize and analyze your emails by priority, and then craft tone-appropriate responses based on historical context, which, it has access to your inbox, so it obviously also has access to. So what that actually is not a single agent, right? It's a step function. So that first step would be what you would consider an analyst agent, right? Organizing my inbox as a data set, specifically by my parameters of priority and importance, right? Which it's programmed to understand. And then the second agent is a copywriting agent, trained in my style and tone through all of that historical data, which is my inbox, the inputs that I've given it. And they work together and they accomplish this task. And that's where we are today. Right. Obviously on a very super simplistic level. Now you can expound on that and you can have a single thing working with essentially 100 different reactionary agents kind of working together. Right. I think what's really exciting, and I know this is what's exciting for us at Loop, we believe that right now, today, the combination of AI in the restaurant back office tied with the growth of what we're seeing in digital ordering could literally not have come at a better time. They're so perfect for each other. Right. In a world of only on-prem restaurants, AI is irrelevant, right? Because of its nature, it can't deal with your physical receipts, your physical orders, your physical inventory sheets, right? It can't tell what a customer is thinking. It can't identify what gets them to come back, right? And there's obviously this plethora of tools that have come along the way, over the years to kind of bridge that gap.
It seems like the dynamic, right? The timing coming off of COVID, the dramatic shift in just the way that people order and, work with restaurants, right? The timing is really perfect. Who would have thought, Bill, who would have thought 10 years ago that, 30% of a full service restaurant that's higher end would be delivery? It was 3% before that. You go on and I see, near me is a steakhouse, Red Steakhouse, and they're on there and I think, man, they have 2,000 reviews, which 10 years ago, no one would have touched that. So Bill, my thought when I hear this, when I would have a chef over the years say, well, it's a little more expensive, but it cuts out that prep time, right? That's what they would say. In the back of my mind, I would always think, oh, that's not going to really save us any time because you're not really going to, we're not going to get that 30 minutes of savings. I don't see it. I wonder how good restaurants are. So let's say they implement something that really reduces the amount of time that they need to be in the office, right? Like a chef has to sit there. I wonder how good they really are at utilizing that additional time in a productive way and being in the space and actually, Because it seems like that's really the biggest value, right? Freeing up to work with people in the kitchen, right? But I wonder how many are good enough to actually transfer 100% of that time.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it comes down to trust. Most of the challenge with AI is a matter of trust. And I'll use a couple of examples. One being, you hear about hallucinations, where AI just makes stuff up. AI's job is to try to please you and to answer the questions the way that it thinks that you want it to answer the questions. So if you look at full self-driving with Tesla, it's probably already better than most of our parents driving, but people don't fully trust it because it's not perfect. So
right.
We're at that weird place where it's graduating to the point where people will begin to take for granted, maybe, that it's accurate. So in the context of a chef, we created a system where we set up the inventory for our customers, which saves weeks of data entry, buys the chef a lot of time that they don't have to spend doing it, and then we struggle to get them to count the inventory. So making use of the time saved is one problem. Trusting the data, I think, is the second problem. But I think more than anything else, it comes down to hiring the right people. Getting the right people in there that really are hungry for information, that are anxious to make benefit of the time that they are afforded. I think those are the real win-loss kind of decisions.
It's because as I was listening to Henry talk about, I had not heard of it explained in such a way that I could actually wrap my head around it. My first thought was, kind of where I went, Bill, with that question. Chefs would have more time to be with people. So in a weird way, it almost elevated. We would have chefs in the office for 3 hours after their shift, just sitting there working on the computer, entering all their stuff. So in a weird way, where my initial thoughts were, what if this reduces the amount of human interaction? You could argue that prior to that, all the work being done that it's replacing was already doing that. So if you have someone that's really good, or maybe a GM that can say, listen, I want you on the floor, I want you behind the line working with your team from this time to this time, they can actually do it without having that stress of going, well, now, great, I'm going to be here till 1 a.m. entering all my stuff. So it was kind of an interest. I hadn't not thought of it that way. In a weird way, it might actually add more human interaction or more quality interaction in the restaurants.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. When I ran restaurants, I was notorious for not allowing chairs in the office.
Yeah, you want like a high desk, like the bar height desk.
You want to sit down, sit in a booth in the restaurant, and if it's too busy to sit in a booth in the restaurant, maybe you shouldn't be sitting down. So, the office time, I think, is one of the things that all restaurants are challenged with. And I always say, you've got a good chef when they're resistant to spending time in the office and they want to be in the kitchen, because that's what you've hired them. That's where their expertise is.
It's funny. Sometimes we would go, this person we would hire who was so good in the restaurant, we go, they can't do any computer work. It's so annoying. But right. At the end of the day, that's the hard part.
Yeah, that's not the job you hired them to do. I always say that the one thing that we focus on at Cogswell is trying to free up the staff to spend more time controlling cost of goods and not just creating them to find out if they're winning or losing.
Right. The amount of actionable data. Do you see it at Cogswell? Are you guys looking for, it sounds like that might not be necessary, but new ways where AI could possibly integrate itself into your side of the world to improve what your product?
Yeah, we have an AI strategy that I think is the right strategy, and I'll describe it. Because it's evolving so quickly, I think people are going to be changing their AI providers a lot in the coming year or 2 years. It's going to be very fluid. There's going to be some that exceed others, and people are going to want to try different AI engines. So rather than trying to build our own AI that is all things to all people, we did what we do with point of sale systems, accounting systems, AP automation systems. We put up an API, and we can integrate with any AI platform. So ClearCogs or 5out, any company that wants to use the data that we're already collecting in Cogswell to do a better job of forecasting and projecting usage prep, ordering quantities, and send back that data. And interestingly, the way we built it, we already have, par level ordering. We have usage projections based on what the run rate is for each item over recent weeks. But if you want to start looking at weather, sporting events, I like to say it's not just that there's a concert. Is it Beyonce or is it Kenny Loggins? You're going to get a completely different crowd. So the AI engines are very, very good at doing that. So the way we built our system is the operators can create the forecasts and push the data into the same tables. So there's no effect on the user. All they know is they got a better forecast.
So you've accepted the Loop AIs and all the different really, really, fast moving third-party groups that are going to be the ones that are evolving faster than anyone else, kind of like how the legacy POS systems were versus Toast and the new ones, right? I mean, there was no APIs. It took a year to get anything done with Aloha or any of the other ones. And so you see the real acceleration is going to be with the really, the focused third-party groups relative to you that are just have an idea and they're just going to keep working it. They're going to really figure out ways to make it amazing.
We'll let them scuffle. And I should point out, just to be clear, there really isn't any integration between Loop AI and Cogswell. But if you're running something like Forte or ClearCogs or TimeForge, all these companies have built some very sophisticated forecast engines. So we decided, why don't we share our data and have the benefit of the work that they're already doing and let the customer decide which one they prefer. And again, update the same tables in our software so that it's seamless to the end user. But at the home office, they can kind of grind on these different AI models and find the one that works best for their business.
So, Henry, the piece that we talked about before we started, I was going to kind of throw it to you. So full service depends so much on human connection. And I think you did a great job already kind of explaining. I mean, that 5% piece was really fascinating. Where do you see AI risking kind of overreach maybe with restaurants, and what should operators maybe just kind of keep in the back of their minds? Like maybe these are things that can't really be replaced.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give you from like personal experience, even outside of restaurants. I think this is starting to resonate across everybody, right? Like something I've personally experienced in a world where, you communicate with people, right? In hospitality, and there's many fields where this is relevant, right? I think honestly, it's almost unethical to take a ChatGPT answer and paste it in an email or a text. And I know, look, we're all probably guilty of it, especially when, everybody first got it on their phones, right? But the receiving end knows, right? It reeks of AI because of that 5%. And trust me, maybe they're surprised, but they're definitely not delighted that you're hitting them with an AI response, right? The second part, I think this is the most important part, is that and I really hope that we never get here, but I think we have to remember that we shouldn't be putting AI in a place where it's telling us what to do. It's not human, right? It's a series of prompts and data inputs. It doesn't have the human experience, even though maybe in the future it could mimic it really well. It just lacks the authenticity of.
I was just about to say authenticity. I mean, I think that is the one word that if I could have thought of.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
Replace that, right? It'll never replace that. It's industries like ours that are structured around hospitality. Like, you can't do that, right? It's not okay. Like, my stand is it's okay and useful everywhere except the customer experience, because it's hospitality. It should be hospitality. And
you're saying all touch points, right? I mean, it all adds up, right? You're getting a response from someone. You had a bad experience, whatever. A GM sends an email out that clearly you just, at this point, as AI becomes more saturated, you just know right away that's bullshit, right? It just got sent out.
I'm not taking away from, look, I know there's an explosion of AI being used in guest experience. I'm not taking away from that, like with voice AI across a number of vendors, right? And in reality, it feels like an efficiency and a labor advancement. And it's hard to deny that, right? I'm just not 100% sold on what it means for the guest. And I'd love to hear kind of Bill's thoughts on this. I think he probably has some pretty strong opinions on it as well.
Yeah, I do. It's interesting. You keep saying 5%. In my experience, 5% to a restaurant is the difference between profit and loss.
Absolutely.
So, we're dealing with very small margins here for sure, but very critical margins. And I fully support the idea that guest experience is not quite AI ready. I think, talking on the phone, answering calls, I would much rather talk to an AI than press 5 for more information, or to repeat your prompts, press 6. I always try to remember that the same people that are building those phone trees are the people that are trying to implement AI in a lot of these businesses. So I'm a little suspicious as to how efficient it's going to actually be in the long run. But I think the other part of it is that you got to look at the different service types. If you're in a quick service restaurant, there's a lot more opportunity for AI. I don't know if you've read any of the anecdotal stories of AI failures and tests that McDonald's and Taco Bell and other companies have done, but one of them, I think it was at Taco Bell, somebody ordered 18,000 cups of water. The other one that I was reading about was some guy asked to have his restaurant taken off Google because they were advertising specials that they didn't have. So there's that disconnect still between not just authenticity, but accuracy and the ability to say, wait a minute, somebody's yanking my chain here. So I think the human personal intervention is still more important. And I'll give you a good example. If you're in Europe and you go to a restaurant and you're fortunate enough to get a waiter that speaks English, you struggle a little bit with them to get them to understand what you want, and they struggle a little bit with you to understand what it is you're saying. But because you're in eye-to-eye contact, it can be very charming, and it can add to the experience. And like, oh, the waiter, he was speaking very heavy French, but we kind of figured it out. On the other hand, if you're talking to an AI, there's a quick acknowledgement that I'm speaking to an AI, and I can get very, very irritated very, very quickly if I feel like I'm just spinning in circles.
That's a good analogy, but right. Well, and also when you're in person, the disconnect you have also could be mitigated by just the body language, right? I mean, just, so right. And that's not at least at this point, that's not something that can easily be translated.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a smile goes a long way in a service situation.
Yeah. So, I mean, Henry, do you think that there are capabilities that, whether it truly is AI or it's somewhat in that world, that is being underutilized right now or under-recognized possibly as something that is or would be really impactful?
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think the biggest thing right now for operators, right, and I think it's a perspective change a little bit, right? I think the biggest thing that a loop can do, with using AI that wasn't really possible before, is that it can essentially become your coworker, right?
Yeah.
Like as an example there, like one of our most successful customers, Dave's Hot Chicken, right? They had this goal that, obviously everyone knows they only went from 0 to $1 billion in 5 years. And they're always focused on cutting edge tech. AI is big for them, right?
So plus my kids love their food. Yeah.
I'm a big fan myself. They had a thesis on their delivery, right? They believe significant part of their customers are sitting at home when they either find them or crave them. They want to order it straight to their home. So I don't believe they do delivery on first party. They only do delivery on third party, but they want to figure out a way to kind of superpower that channel, right? And this is really where AI kicks in, right? They want to figure out, how do we run thousands of experiments to our customer cohorts, tweak them, integrate them. And they did this until they got the secret sauce right. So that's where the agents really come to play. It's not just to execute like a marketing campaign or send a specific set of emails. They do that, obviously, but they also, what they can do is they can understand why a campaign has to be run a certain way. For Dave's, right? They don't like giving away discounts. They don't want to lose margins. They don't want to dilute the value of their food or their brand. Right. Like now with the help of these agents, what they're able to do is they take as many inputs as they want. Think infinite, run thousands of campaigns at the same time and run these experiments at scale that would normally take you an insane.
Dude, that's mind blowing. That's
like, that's the real power there, is that not only just running those experiments would take massive hours, think about the amount of labor hours it would take to analyze the results. AI does that like this, right? Live actionable data immediately. And that's the real power. And it's like this super powered coworker on your team that you can assign assignments to, that it can outpower and outmaneuver any human being. And that's the right way to use AI, right? And it's a perspective change, and it's going to come, right?
That is really interesting. I mean, the marketing from a restaurant standpoint, I always felt it was very challenging. Even if we tried testing and doing this and doing it was so hard for us to piece these things together. We probably weren't working with the right type of firms or groups to do this. But you're right, to be able to have that on a massive scale and tweak and fine tune and constantly do that is unbelievable.
Otherwise, right? Like, you imagine the army of marketers you would need to run that, the army of like analysts you would need to go then review.
You need 1,000 people. I mean, that's
yeah.
So it's funny, as you're talking, one of my favorite, I love the comedian Jim Gaffigan, and he talks about, how lazy he is. And he's like, I'm already annoyed when I call for carryout that they don't know what I want. Like, that's what he talks about. And as you're talking, my first thought was, well, that won't be an issue much longer. Sir, do you want whatever? Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's like endless So really, right, the communication piece on the marketing side is just fascinating for QSR especially. So Bill, looking ahead, a couple years, is there anything that you see AI doing for restaurants in scale that beyond what we just talked about with maybe the marketing side that it just can't do today, or that people wouldn't have confidence for it doing today?
I put some thought to this. I try to be current, but I also try to think ahead. And I've seen a lot of AI use cases that I just don't think are significantly going to work. They may work to a certain degree, but there's certain things that I think AI is very, very well suited for. Things like kitchen routing, real-time cooking prediction, when to fire, used to be the wheel person that was like, okay, fire this, start that, to try to get things to time and come together for optimal quality and freshness on the line. I've looked at a couple of things where companies are trying to use cameras to detect overportioning, mixed spoilage, unsafe behaviors is an easy one. So I think that there's a lot of possibility there. But the word that I always keep in mind is optimization. There's got to be a way to optimize the things that we already know are useful, are beneficial, and using AI to speed that process and to learn more quickly how we can better do these things. I love the idea of, I read an article on a company that said, well, here's all the ingredients that we have in our restaurant already. Give me a list of 10 menu items that we can make with the product we already have.
I read that article. I read at least what I did.
Yeah.
And it was a real chef, a serious chef that did it. It wasn't, that was a serious chef that was.
You could do that at home from your phone today already. It's already down to the consumer, right? Like you can literally do that today. It's crazy.
Yeah, the extent for me is if I'm putting rice in a rice cooker, I just forget. I'm like, how much water do I put? And it's always exactly the number, same cups as I put for rice. That's about it. But when I read that article, I thought that was fascinating. There was nothing that chef felt was beneath him in terms of creativity. It was allowing him to be more present and he was able to be actually providing more ideas on a more regular basis. And I love that. Was a really neat article about that.
Yeah, it really was. And it's interesting because the way I explain it to people is AI used to be hiring guys like me that can come in and look at your reports, look at your operation and say, okay, here's what's going on. Here's some things that you could do very quickly to optimize your operation. So I think part of what's happening right now is leveraging learned experience from seasoned operators to train AI to know what to look for. And I'll give you a good example. Everybody knows what a menu engineering report is, but very few people understand how to use the data to optimize. They're looking at optimizing costs instead of optimizing pricing. You can't optimize your costs to a higher level of revenue. And the more revenue you get, the less you have to worry about the costs. So getting people to understand how to read these reports.
You're right. We're very guilty of that.
Yeah, I think one of the agentic things that Henry was talking about earlier that I think we're going to see is to be able to comb through the many reports that are already available in systems like ours and others and say, look, this is what I see. This is where you're winning and losing. Here's where there's opportunity for you.
Yeah. No, it's, I do wonder, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, Bill. I do think a big barrier, again, is building the foundation, right? To not today, but previously, in terms of being able to really utilize the technology that existed, which really was just integrated data, right? But you needed the recipe, you needed all the information done well. And I always felt that we would almost have one person that didn't do anything but that. Like we didn't even let anyone else touch the recipe book or touch these things because we were so, one bad thing here or there and the whole thing was just haywire. And I do wonder if, with advancements with AI and just the way that these programs talk to each other, if more people who maybe don't have that way of thinking, right, where you have to build it so perfectly, if they can actually take more advantage of this in the future, right, where in the past it didn't work for them because either it was garbage in, garbage out, right? They weren't really doing it, but that seemed to be a barrier. And I think that's also why a lot of larger restaurant groups were able to do that because they had a whole department, they had one or two people that could do just that and manage it.
So effort creating the data rather than understanding the data.
It was a full-time job to just do it and check that box. And I do wonder if that's a new world that's going to open up to people.
Yeah, I think that the response time and the turnaround is going to be dramatic, and it's coming very quickly. These aren't future conversations. These are things that are going to be happening in the months and maybe even a couple of years ahead. We've moved from the era of machine learning to generative thinking, and I think that people don't understand the significance of that. Machine learning says if you give me an input or a series of inputs and an outcome, then what happens is machine learning regresses from the outcome back to the inputs and learns how it got there. And if it does that enough times and it really understands how to get to that outcome, now you can turn it loose and say, okay, here's a whole lot of inputs. Learn the best way to use that data and give me a different perspective on the outcome. That's where we are now, and I think that's the exciting part about AI. It's not just automation. It's not just doing it more quickly. It's doing it more thoughtfully.
Yeah. Henry, from your standpoint, if we were to look ahead, let's say 5 years, and a restaurant group hired you to say, I want the most top-of-the-line AI-driven technology that exists today, and that's 5 years from now. So what do you even think that could possibly even look like? Can you even think, is it even possible to even consider what that might be?
Yeah, I mean, 5 years from now is a lifetime in this space right now.
Right. That's like pre-internet and post-internet. Yeah.
It's hard to even imagine 6 months from now. But I think what should happen is I think we're all on the same page on this. I think AI should definitely minimize itself in the front of house. I think it should remain a guest experience. Will a robot be better at cutting onions than a human? Maybe. But, we've had automated shredders since the 60s. I think the place where we'll see the most change will be essentially invisible to the consumer, I hope. It'll look very different, right? Your back office will have a team of these AI agents that are fully optimized, fully connected, running through data, completing back office operational tasks at magnitudes, speeds, and scales that no human could remotely come close to. Right. All the things that like us in hospitality, right, like the operator doesn't actually enjoy doing, right? That's not what they signed up for. And I think that's the way to look at it. Like, where are the opportunities for us to superpower our humans in our space? And I think that's the direction that it's naturally headed. Right. But can I predict 5 years from now in AI? Absolutely not. That's like 100 years in our space here.
Yeah. As I was asking that question, I kind of thought that was going to be where that was going.
It's definitely exciting. I think the sky's the limit. I think that's the way to, like, there's nothing too big or too small to tackle. And as we're improving it, we're getting over that kind of, even on the chat side, we're getting over that humanistic 5% kind of failure mode, right? Like, we'll see that break. We'll definitely see that get maybe not 100%, but definitely incrementally closer to that 99.999, infinity.
I can't wait to see it. I kind of wish I would be in a position to utilize it more than I am at this point in my life. Before I learned about Compete, I had 3 Excel sheets that had to be open at the same time that linked up to do what I wanted. And then Compete in my brain was like, oh my God, I can't believe with 2 restaurants I could have a program like this. So for me, this has always been this upward push to get to this level and to see the type of stuff that exists now and that's coming is so fascinating to me. I just think it's really interesting. All right, well, before I let you guys go here, I try to ask a few just random funny questions or just something that's, so you guys have an interesting background. So I guess, Bill, if you were to think, what was the one item that you felt over the years that the tech world, we'll call it, or the side of the world that you were on, thought was going to be a huge win for restaurants, and it just was never going to happen? It just never even went anywhere. Does anything stick out at you?
Boy, that's a good one. Along the lines of predictive technology, there was a company, 25 years ago called Hyperactive Bob. It was a guy that came out of NASA that was doing predictive algorithms. And he came up with a system that would tell the kitchen when to start putting burgers on the grill before the guests would show up to order. It was very efficient, but the staff didn't trust it. They're like, there's no cars in the parking lot. Why would we start putting burgers on the grill? And then sure enough, the orders would follow. So there were some use cases and studies that were basically put together that showed it to be quite efficient, but because the staff didn't trust it, it was a failure, and you've never heard of hyperactive Bob since.
He was too far ahead.
That's the one that stands out to me that I was very excited about for the same reasons as AI, but it was ahead of its time and people weren't ready for that.
And I guess, Henry, my question is, so you recently moved to Florida. What are your thoughts on living in Florida versus New York? I can't really imagine. I mean, that's got to be completely upside down.
Yeah, I never thought I would leave New York. Honestly, a lot of people that know me never could imagine that I would ever leave New York. I'm a Brooklyn boy, and it's really tough to get out of my comfort zone here. It's different. It's definitely different. The people are friendlier. I don't know if I like that or dislike it. People are definitely friendlier. It's definitely taking some getting used to. The weather is much nicer. The roads are less destroyed. It's actually a joy to drive around without hitting a pothole every few minutes. So all in all, so far it's been great. I definitely miss all of my New York family and friends. But yeah, it's very different than what I'm used to.
Do you miss, I always think of New York as there's just more coincidences that happen in New York than anywhere else. Like, do you miss running into people and, that randomness? No. Yep.
It's both a positive and a negative. In some cases, yes. In some cases, there's definitely people I wish I didn't run into on the street in New York that I have. So, you take the good with the bad. But yeah, no, obviously, I think the hardest part about that is that I have very, very deep roots in New York, and I'm a little bit of a fish out of water here. So I think that's just I've only been here a few months, and I'm still kind of adapting. But it's very noticeable that I'm not from here to the folks that are.
It's just right. Even probably you talk much faster than everyone there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. People have asked me at the grocery store, can you slow down?
That's funny. Well, listen, I really appreciate it. I think you guys it's just great talking to both of you. I could do this all day. I think this is an extremely challenging topic for restaurants because so many of us just don't understand what it is, even this whole blanket of AI and technology really is. So I thought this was fascinating. I'd love to do it again. And really try to help some operators take their first step maybe into that space and see what it looks like in actual terms, right? This is a little bit more kind of theoretical or, more just talking about where things are going and what's good or bad for restaurants. But, if I was a restaurant owner, I think the next conversation is, if I want to go down this road, what does that mean? What do I do next? So that'll be maybe down the next one. But I thank you guys very much. I really appreciate your time and look forward to talking again soon.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks.
Thank you.